Hi, I'm Mark Gaylor. Welcome to my Editing Images in Lightroom CC Editing Guide. Now this is for photographers wanting to edit primarily on their mobile devices, smartphones and tablets. Now it is possible to install Lightroom CC on laptops and desktop computers as well. Now this is a different product to Lightroom Classic. So if you're a Classic user, I do have a separate tutorial movie for that product. Now one of the advantages of CC is its cloud syncing across all devices. We don't really have to worry where we're storing our images, and once we've edited an image on one device, it appears edited on all of our devices. Now one of the ways that Adobe manages this Lightroom CC version is a variation of working with original files and something called smart previews. These are low resolution versions of the full resolution file. We can at any time download that full resolution to our mobile device if it is not already there. If any time in the future your storage capacity is slightly compromised, then Lightroom CC may decide to remove the originals from your device and just leave them in the cloud storage, but we always have access to our original files. You can actually use Lightroom CC on a mobile device without paying a subscription fee, but if you are a member you do get that 1 terabyte worth of cloud storage. If you go to the full cloud storage option, you're able to sync presets and profiles. You have some localized editing adjustments such as the healing brush, and also selective adjustments like radial filters, graduated filters, and we also have what's called Sensei Search. This is the ability to search our images looking for specific images even though we may not have added keywords to those images. Now this is basically using artificial intelligence or machine learning to recognize certain things. So for instance, we can search for dogs just by the fact that the software will recognize what a dog looks like and then just show us the images that are just the dogs in our catalog. So one of the things that if you are taking your mobile device out on the road with your cameras and you're wanting to add images to that mobile device, maybe you're using a 64 gigabyte SD card, you are going to have to be careful not to exceed the storage capacity of your mobile device, and also compromise the data transfer. Now some of you may be on data transfer limits, and some of you might have slow cellular communications. So one of the things I do recommend is once you're on the road and you don't have Wi-Fi access, switch off the cloud storage both on the device, such as you might be using Google Photos or Dropbox or iCloud Photos. Switch all of that off, and also switch off the option for using cellular data in the Lightroom CC app. Otherwise you're going to be chewing through your data limits very, very quickly. One of the things that if you're out on the road, you're going to be wanting to add images directly from your memory cards to your mobile device. So this may not be possible to hook the camera directly up to your mobile device, so you might need to check that. I'm currently using an SD card reader to my iPad Pro. Now iPad Pros have just recently upgraded to USB-C ports, and my very latest Sony camera does actually have a USB-C port, so it may be possible to hook the camera directly up to the mobile device. And you can actually now bypass maybe something like iPhotos and take the images directly into Lightroom. Now one of the advantages of editing and editing images on the road is just minutes after capturing an image we can share an image. So I might have taken a picture of somebody playing tennis or somebody's dog running, and within minutes I can share that image, an edited version of that image, so that they can have quick access to that file. It is also possible to add images on Lightroom CC on your laptop or desktop computer, and those images will eventually appear on your mobile device when that mobile device is synced. Now one of the advantages of doing this is you you're going to be able to access and edit your images. Maybe you're on a long distance flight and you can start editing the images. What I do strongly recommend, however, is syncing your Lightroom catalog before leaving home, syncing via a fast Wi-Fi connection. Otherwise it is going to take a little bit of time to sync all of those raw files, hundreds and hundreds of raw files you may have added via, again, cellular data. Okay, before we go into the editing, I just want to do a little bit of basically my personal feelings towards editing images. Some people have mixed feelings towards why and when we should edit images. Now, I strongly believe that cameras do not see what we see and they cannot record what we feel. And that's because cameras are merely mechanical devices without a soul. Cameras can collect information, but their images do not communicate our memories and feelings without first being edited. So the unprocessed image file is the equivalent, say, to the composer's score, while editing that image is the performance. This is where we put our heart and soul and what we actually want to say about what we've captured. Now, this was adapted from an Ansel Adams quote, and he was talking about going out and shooting images on film, and basically that was his composer's score, if you like, but the performance happened in the darkroom. Now these days we're using Lightroom. Okay, editing images in Lightroom allows us to express our vision and tell our story. Some photographers you'll see online like to use an acronym SOOC, straight out of camera. Some photographers wear this as a badge, as if to say, look, I haven't cheated. But I also feel that that is also a way of declaring, look, I have had no personal response to the subject matter I've been capturing. I'm just letting my camera, the mechanical camera, just tell you what it captured. I'm not going to interject and tell you how I feel about what I captured. Okay, to give you some hard concrete examples of this, this is an image of my local pier at sunset. Now, generally these sunset shots are not what we remember seeing. Cameras record sunsets completely different to how humans see sunsets. So if I was to post this online, I possibly would get very, very few likes. This is the straight out of camera view. Cameras generally don't deal with contrast very well, but just with a small amount of editing, maybe a graduated or linear filter, I can add what I actually experienced at sunset at my local pier. And this is, for me, a more accurate way of communicating what I saw and also what I felt about what I saw. To give you another extreme example, I captured this in Monument Valley in USA. It's at sunrise, and the foreground is almost a complete silhouette. I couldn't have raised the exposure in camera anymore, otherwise I would have overexposed the sky. So the foreground becomes only a silhouette, but this is not what I remember seeing. I would have seen rich detail in those foreground shadows, and so again, with a little bit of editing, raising the shadows, bringing down the highlights, this is how I can tell you what I saw when I captured this image. Now, sometimes the differences that I'm editing can be quite subtle. This is a cold, frosty morning in the UK in winter, and again, this is straight out of camera. It's not a million miles from what I saw, but if I want to communicate how absolutely freezing cold this situation was, is again a little bit of editing shows that white, crisp frost in all of its glory, and this is much closer to what I felt about what I photographed. Now, cameras, as I said, are compromised in what they can capture, especially with high contrast scenes, but also lenses distort what they see compared to the human vision. For instance, these verticals on these beach huts seem to be falling inwards. This is a lens effect from using an ultra wide angle lens where the camera is tilted up slightly. The verticals will lean in very aggressively, and in post-production we can correct those verticals to represent what we would have saw with the human eyes. So see Lightroom less as an instrument for cheating, more as a way of telling the truth, telling your story, being honest about what it is we captured and how we felt about what we captured. I call this expressive editing. It's learning how to say what you want to say, and with a little bit of practice you can edit your images in just a minute or two to be faithful to your memories. Here is another example of straight out of camera. You can see all of the sliders there in Lightroom CC. They're all zeroed out. So this is basically what the camera captured. Now, who is to say whether this is correct? You weren't there, I was there, and I might choose to edit this in a completely different way. For instance, who's to say that it doesn't communicate more accurately about how I felt about what I saw? Or maybe a different photographer would prefer to communicate a little bit more warmth in this situation. Or maybe a black and white dramatic shot because we were knocked over by how dramatic the light and shade was as it sculpted these sand dunes in Western Australia. So who's to say which is correct? Now, for some people, they do actually want to edit just to actually alter reality, just so they can gain what's called a signature style. It's a way of finding a unique voice, so that when people see your images, they'll go, oh, that reminds me of the images captured by, and if you're lucky, they'll mention your name, because the style of the way you edit is basically part of how you communicate as a photographer. Without much further ado, let's jump into editing images in Lightroom CC. Now, I have heard on some forums, some self-appointed Lightroom experts will say the software engineers arrange these in a particular order that you should go in when you're editing your images. Now, I've been a beta tester for 2 decades or so, and this is exactly not what the Lightroom engineers envisaged. Lightroom engineers describe Lightroom as a non-linear editing program. It really doesn't matter what editing slider you touch first, and what I always like to advise is start by editing what you notice first, and then finish up with editing the things that are annoying you least. And then when you're happy that you've managed to communicate what it is you want to say, the editing is complete. Okay, so as I said, just to recap there, start with fixing what annoys you the most and finish with what annoys you the least. So let's start to edit. The first thing you're going to do is, when you're in the grid view, you're just going to tap on one of the images, and that will take you straight into the edit module or panel. Now, we have a series of collapsed panels there, and we can just tap on any of those panels to open them up to start the editing process. Now, another thing that you can do before you start to edit is you can get information about your image. You can basically do a 2-finger tap on the screen, and you can cycle through basically when the image was captured, the camera settings used to capture that image, and you can also cycle through to what is called a histogram. This is a graphical representation of tone, and some photographers find this useful when editing images. It's a bit like having a rear view mirror in a car. It's something you can glance at or refer to occasionally to get a little bit more information about how the editing is going, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through this tutorial. You can also access that just by tapping once in the top right hand corner, tapping once again on view options, and you can either show hide info or show hide histogram. You've also got an option for what's called film strip. I know you're probably not using film, but that's what the Lightroom engineers like to call little thumbnails that appear on the bottom of the screen, so you can jump between images that you're editing without going back to that grid view. I prefer to maximize the screen real estate, so typically I'll have that collapsed and only open that up when I'm moving on to the next image. So I've opened up the light panel there. Now you feel free to move those sliders around. Don't be afraid of moving them very aggressively. Move them all the way to the end of the slider if you like. You cannot do any damage to your image. You can always revert back to the original state of the image. Basically, Lightroom CC is a non-destructive editing program. You will never permanently adjust your image. Lightroom always keeps the original in its unedited state, and all of the Lightroom edits are just applied on the fly, so you can see that on the screen. If you do hold down one finger onto the screen, you can actually go and look at a before and after view, so you can basically track your progress through the editing procedure. Now, most of the edits you're going to be doing is you're just going to be putting a single finger on a slider and moving that slider left or right. Now, there are a couple of variations to the way we edit. We can pinch zoom the image, basically just magnify the size of the image slightly, and now when we touch one of the sliders and move left or right, all of those panels on the right hand side will auto collapse, so we can see basically the image in its enlarged magnified view without the panels getting in the way. Basically the adjustment slider that we're moving will stay visible on the screen, but all of the other panels and sliders will disappear from view momentarily. Another thing that we can do is, again, we will basically be using mostly single finger slides and taps on the screen, but there are 4 or more sliders where we can actually put 2 fingers on the screen and slide 2 fingers when moving an adjustment slider. Now in the light panel, this is the blacks, whites, highlights and shadow slider, and we can get what's called a threshold view when we do that, to see where on the screen or what parts of the image we're losing information. So in the top right hand corner of this preview that I'm showing you here, we have the original image, and as I'm sliding the black slider to the left, any areas that appear black on the screen, it's going absolute black. We're losing all texture and detail in those areas, so usually this is an indication to move the slider back the other way, not be quite so aggressive with the adjustment on this particular slider. Now, when we're editing an image, you may be looking at the image going, the quality doesn't look great, and it's to do with maybe the screen preview. We can see almost like pixelation or tonal banding, not smooth transitions of tone and or color. Now, when this happens, it's most likely that the original file is in Adobe's Creative Cloud, and you actually got just a smart preview on your mobile device. This will often happen when we've added images via a laptop or desktop computer using Lightroom CC on those devices. And typically the original file isn't downloaded to the mobile device unless we specifically ask Lightroom to do that. So if you do notice that you've got some stepping or banding of tone, just go up to your little cloud icon and choose Get This Original, and you'll notice the quality of the preview jumps up as soon as that original file is downloaded to your device. You can, for instance, also choose to store all images in an album that you've created and store all of those images locally on your mobile device, so long as you have enough storage space on that device. Now, another thing that you should be aware of when using smart previews is we can happily just edit the image using that smart preview, and occasionally you won't see any drop in quality or whatever. But when you're going to export the image and you're wanting a big 4K export that can be viewed on your 4K TV, or to share very high resolution with a social media site such as Flickr or 500px, you don't have to worry about the fact that you're working with that lower resolution smart preview, because as soon as you try and export a much higher resolution image, Lightroom will automatically download the full resolution version, apply your editing workflow on that full resolution, and then export that ultra high definition version to your files or to social media. Be sure to check out all of the movies in this Lightroom CC Masterclass series. There's also a supporting ebook that you can download from my website. Just head over to www.markgaylor.com and then look for that downloads link. If you find any of my resources useful, just consider making a small donation. This will help me create future learning resources. I also host a Patreon site. This is going to allow you to join Q&A forums where you'll have your individual questions answered and also attend seminars. I'll also give a photo critique service. Okay, so thumbs up if you've enjoyed the movie, and I'll catch you online next time.